Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to learn about construction SWIP design on your lunch hour. We really appreciate it, and we hope you learned some cool stuff today. Big shout out to the Washington Stormwater Center for hosting this webinar. They've got lots of great resources online and tools for all types of projects and construction and just stormwater requirements. This is the third webinar in a series we've been doing with the Washington Stormwater Center. So today we have really awesome presenters. So first up, Russell Betteridge will be presenting, and he's worked in public service for over 20 years. He's been helping designers and performing stormwater and erosion control inspections, and he has experience with sampling, pollution response, and even training other inspectors. So let's welcome Russell, the NPDES inspector for the city of Tukwila. Our second presenter today is Royce Young, and Royce has inspected stormwater BMPs in 6 different states. She has experience doing industrial, municipal, and construction stormwater inspections, and she is now the stormwater specialist for the city of DuPont. So it's very exciting. Take it away, Russell.
Great. Okay, so as Maddie said, I'm the NPDES inspector for the city of Tukwila, and what I'm sharing today is my own product and not representative of the city of Tukwila's policies or procedures in any way. As Maddie alluded to, I'm the 15-year Cecil certified. I'm an APWA certified stormwater manager. I've had HAZWOPER certified certification in the past and FEMA training in the past on dealing with emergencies in the environment. Also Endangered Species Act and NPDES trainer for city and municipal staff, and developed SWIPs and been a SWIP inspector. So to dive into this, talking about construction SWIP development, there's a lot of things we can start to say. An ounce of prevention, is worth a pound of cure, right? He who fails to prepare, prepares to fail, right? So SWIP is all about that preparation. You're thinking ahead in your construction. What am I going to do if? And it's really kind of trying to see the future, have that crystal ball ready. It's planning out that pollution prevention, right? There's a lot of development pressures out there. If you're building something big, there's a lot of people involved, the developer, the banker, the planner, the architect. There's not only those people as well, there's the neighbors, there's the larger community of people, just somebody driving behind a truck that's coming to your site. There's a lot of folks with eyes on your project. And of course, everybody involved in the project wants to get the job done quickly. A lot of things are skipped over. SWIPs are one of the things that get skipped a lot. I kind of joke about that because SWIP and skip rhyme, right? So 2 projects, those greater than an acre require an additional permit, a construction stormwater general permit, which goes even further into SWIP and SWIP development. It requires certain sampling over and above what is normal in a SWIP, but even the smaller sites, you've got to have that local program control, that local SWIP. You're still going to have the same guy like me showing up, making sure things are clean, okay? And when we talk about clean, Royce further on in the next presentation is going to talk about pollution and what that means. So requirements, the Western Washington Stormwater Management Manual really lines that out. Every city and county in Western Washington has a compliant manual. If they don't just use Western Washington's, they have their own that's very similar. Construction stormwater general permit, all of these things are available on Ecology's website, and implement that sediment, erosion, and pollution prevention control measures there, right? The second step, right? That's what you're required to do. The implement and comply portion of that website, it has the current permit documents. So if you have to explain to your funding people, your finance folks, why is this costing so much? It's easy to roll this out and say, look, here's why we have this budget line item. Here's why this SWIP is costing us so much. Here's why it's so important to have. You can see that small business economic impact assessment right there. If you need more resources, more ammo to get more resources, it's there and available for you. To implement and comply, here's that that water quality web portal. That's where your Cecil is going to go in and put his reports. You're going to want to keep that piece of paper as well, though. You're going to want to develop a toolkit that at the end of the project, maybe you have a bunch of binders that document all of this stuff. Photos are a great way to do that, especially if you have it where the date and time is printed on the photo. If it's digital, that's all just based right in the file, but you want to be able to show and document your compliance throughout your project. And I want to focus right down here. There's the SWP template. There's lots of others. There's a site inspection form template. There's the request for chemical treatment. That's around things like pH control and concrete applications. And there's the stormwater manuals link again. So, you know, those resources, they're all over the place. There's other resources as well. The stormwater center is another great one I'll talk about in a little bit here, but pulling up that template, it's good for any size job. It's really available for you to use, and it walks you through a process. It's a Word document you can fill in. It's, you know, it's not like copyrighted or something where you can't use it. When you're done, you'll have a 35-page or more proactive plan. It walks you through, you know, that line of thinking on how you're going to prevent stormwater pollution during your project. And it has all the elements in order of operations. Usually there is some where, you know, these elements run through the entire project from design to finished construction. So some of the elements aren't really in order, but we'll talk about that a little bit. And they all refer to best management practices. So there's not something hard and fast. You can't say we always have to do X or there's always, you know, the A, B's, and C's to do. Best management practices are a way where you're going to apply this to keep stormwater clean. That changes on any given project, depending on the land, depending on the soils, depending on the operations you're doing during that section of your project. You know, if you've got a guy coming in pouring concrete, you've got different BMPs available for that day. That BMP, when you're done with concrete, maybe that eco-pan is now gone. You don't even have that in your SWP any longer. You want to show, you want to be able to pull out that binder, pull out that section of your SWP and say, look, here's the picture of our concrete pumping operation, and we had eco-pans. Here's the bills from those eco-pan contractors. And you can find these BMP manuals that have all of these types of things right there. There's the link on fortress.wa.gov. There's lots of publications, and they're adding to those BMPs all the time. If you guys come up with something new, you can certainly add it through the tape process. There's other processes where BMPs can be added as well. So first off, knowing your plan, right? Knowing your site plan, the designer, the developer, you guys know your plan best. You know where there's forest that has to be retained. You're going to put a fence up that says, don't drive any machines back here. You know where rain gardens are going to go. You know where the wet pond is eventually going to be. Maybe it's not there initially, but that's where it's going to be built. You know where the bioswales, the existing wetlands are. You know where the infiltration areas are. I want to take a moment, just a second, to address kind of rain gardens and what's called low impact development and the protections required during construction, because you may have those on your plan and maybe your erosion control plan starts to address those. But if you don't train your contractors that come onto the site, and maybe you didn't anticipate that they're bringing large construction machines with them, and they start driving over your rain garden areas, or they start driving over your pervious pavements or your infiltration areas, or, you know, if they're over compacting that space where you had planned to put in an infiltration gallery underneath the parking lot, they've just ruined the infiltration capacity. And your plan is now, you got to adjust it. You're going to have to restructure those soils. So when you start developing this plan, mark it up, have those plans printed out. I suggest people develop a set of books that that go through in periods, weekly or monthly, or maybe it's a project period. Maybe it's phase one, we're bringing in lots of earth. We have a phase one SWP. Maybe it's, you know, it's so individual. It's hard to say how you should set this up, but I suggest having it written down in a set of binders so that then you can go through and create that defensible document set, right? And when you start looking at this living document of a SWP, you start marking it up, and you can train your CECLs, you can train other staff. Here you can see the different colored pencils they're using. You can see how they've got the compost socks ready, how they're, you know, kind of adjusting their plan. Of course, this says not for construction on it. So, you know, I'd kind of look at that and say, well, hold on a second, this is for construction. This is our active plan. Put a date on it. Make sure people know that this is what we did during this time frame. You know, if there's a significant weather event, put that rainstorm down on there. How big was that rainstorm? What were your sample results? Have that all put together in that same binder. So to go through that SWP development more, it categorizes each element and each BMP under each of those following elements, right? There's 12 or 13 of them. Of course, this series, we're really focused on pollutants and controlling those, but I'm going to kind of walk through really briefly kind of each one. So preserving vegetation, when you use this template and you've got that Word document open, it's asking you questions. It's saying, describe the method you're going to use to protect these areas. We talked about that forest that's on your plan, you know, and you're going to put up a fence to make sure nobody drives out in that forest and starts cutting trees down, right? So that's really easy to list and describe there. Then I start to say, well, list that BMP down. And Royce is going to talk more about how to do that. You know, establish your construction access. You may have several different access points at several different times, that phasing of your project. Maybe sometimes the big trucks have to use one entrance and the small trucks have to use a different one. Make sure you anticipate what's going on your project when it comes to that construction access. Make sure it's written in your plan, you know when and how and where. Train the people so that they know that BMP C105 is going to be active during these times and all other times. Control flow rates. This is a really interesting one because it goes all the way back to that design team I was talking about. When you're developing your SWP, you're looking at a whole lot of factors. Rainfall is a big one of them, right? And then there's more in here on rainfall rates and the 10-year or the 25-year. There's a whole bunch of things you can talk about. But the SWP template is really good because it walks you through that thinking. And if you don't just skim over it and pass by it, and you really put some thought to it, like assure that detention facilities are functioning properly before constructing your site improvements and putting down impervious surfaces. Don't get that horse behind the cart, right? Make sure you're doing that in the right order. You know, and then listing and describing your PMPs. Don't shortcut yourself. Don't limit yourself to just one. Oh, we always use this and it's always worked in the past. You might have to think outside the box because you've got a new site. Install sediment controls. You know, I love it when I show up on a site and the only thing they're using is sediment socks and they're washing everything through it, paint, drywall, all of it's going. And they just point to the sock and say, hey, look, we've got our sediment sock, but that's only for filtering sediment. There's a ton of other BMPs you have to consider. You can't just use one sediment control for all the pollutants on your site. You know, one of the questions here, describe how you will direct stormwater for maximum infiltration where feasible. That's where you're really trying to focus on LID in all of your construction activities. How can you get this water back in the ground where it used to go and not just let it flow down to the nearby creek during your construction project? Element 5, stabilized soils. Of course, this is the meat and potatoes of surface water pollution. You know, making sure that erosion and sedimentation control is happening. You don't want to get to sedimentation control. You want to stop the erosion that creates the sedimentation. You want to stop it early. How are you going to minimize the disturbance of steep slopes, right? There's lots of BMPs around steep slopes and how to manage it. You know, contractors develop their own shortcut methods. Sometimes they don't work. Sometimes you have to learn from one project to the next. Well, we need to do a bit more. And if the finance guys aren't on board and your project team's not on board with doing that extra stuff, you need to show them the additional bills you had to pay last time because it didn't work. All right, protecting slopes here. We just talked about that in the last, stabilizing soils, right? So they're walking you through that again because slopes are a big problem, right? So here we get into that specific 10-minute flow rate from a type 1A storm, right? That 10-year, 24-hour frequency. Your engineer has to look at that and say, how much water is going to fall on this? If Godzilla comes and stomps on our project, what are we going to do? How is it going to happen? How are we going to save downstream resources from the pollution we're creating? Protecting drain inlets. Of course, this is where you really get into that bark bag or the sediment sock, or, you know, you get into a manufactured product that starts to help you once your inlets are in place, or if you have existing inlets you're working around, what are you doing right up front to protect that inlet and that really that discharge point from your project? So stabilizing channels and outlets, you know, here on the west side, there's a little different rule than on the east side. Again, we get into that stormwater rate where you've got alternatively, there's the 10-year or 1-hour flow rate predicted for an approved continuous runoff model. Right? That's a lot of language on how do I protect these channels, right? This ditch that eventually is going to have grass in it, but it doesn't quite yet. How am I going to protect it until the grass is growing? How am I going to make sure through my inspection and maintenance plan that if it does start to erode and sedimentation is moving, what am I going to really do? And who's going to do it, right? So when we get to element 9, I wanted to break that out because this often gets skipped over, and you'll hear this from Royce a little bit later here. Pollutants, a lot of times people get to this and they say, nope, this isn't a former gas station. Nope, we're not cleaning up groundwater. Nope, this isn't a former plywood plant or, you know, leather tannery or nuclear waste facility. So we don't have pollutants on our site. This isn't talking about legacy pollutants. This is talking about the pollutants that you are bringing to your construction site. You know when foam insulation is going in. You know when the painter is going to be on site. You know when the drywallers are going to be there. You know when you're pouring concrete. You know when all these contractors are showing up. You know when machines are going to be delivered. Those are bringing pollutants to your site. That's what needs to be listed here. List them all. List them all and then start figuring out, well, how am I going to give these guys doing the work the tools to protect water from their own cleanups or spills, whatever is happening on the site. Make sure you're filling that out correctly, looking at the pollutants that you are bringing. Okay, and this template walks you through. Will maintenance, fueling, or repair of heavy equipment and vehicles occur on site? So if the answer is yes here, you already know it's fuel. It's heavy equipment that's causing the pollution. So you need to deal with that. The spill prevention and control. You know, you need to deal with that. Don't just skip over it. The wheel wash from that construction entrance site. You know, a lot of sites don't start with a wheel wash, but maybe over time it's decided that, you know what, there's just too much track out going on. The 4 to 6 inch riprap that we put down in our construction entrance is just not sucking up enough of that. It's not knocking off enough of the waste from the tires. We've got too many track out complaints from the neighbors and from the inspectors showing up. So we're going to install a wheel wash. Maybe you don't think of that to start with, but this is where it's a living document. Bring it up, put it in, install it, use it. You know, if it's necessary, get it there. pH modifying sources, there's a big long list of those, right? Make sure you understand what they are because you are bringing that pollutant to the site. You know, if you're going to start amending your soils with fly ash, that's a really specific, you know, construction technique that you need to control. What happens if it starts raining while you're in the middle of amending that soils to make them hold up your building? Are you doing exposed aggregate? Are you washing that final concrete to expose aggregate? What's going to happen with that wash water? I can't tell you how many times I've stopped construction projects because they've just let the water go and it's now in, you know, 1.5 miles of stormwater system down the street. Describe those pH modifying, you know, put them right in there. The template is great for walking you through. If you don't pay attention to that template and it's just blank, an inspector like me shows up and I pull out my pH pen. All right, so controlling your dewatering. If there's water on your site and you have to move it somewhere, you know, you show up and your foundation's full, what are you gonna do? Expect to have it, expect to have water. Don't assume that the sun's always going to shine on your construction project. Plan for that rain, plan for that unexpected groundwater. Have a plan so that you can reach into that toolkit and do something about it. There's a lot of great BMPs on how to dewater without moving contaminants, right? Infiltration, transport offsite in a vehicle, an ecology approved offsite chemical treatment, sanitary or combined sewer discharge. That takes a little bit of permitting. You've got to think ahead, get your permit into whatever county you're in, make sure that the city agrees you can move that waste. And then there's all sorts of other testing requirements when you're trying to do a combined sewer or a construction stormwater sewer discharge. Using a sedimentation bag at the end of a pump. So you've got your pump hose coming out to a swale, you put that bag on the end of that pipe, and maybe that's not enough. Maybe you need a silt triangle as well. Make sure your SWP is adjustable. You can manage that as it comes up and maintain your investment. Your SWP is money going into your construction site. Make sure you are maintaining that investment, right? If sediment socks are clogged and you flood a whole street, well, now you've just flooded all the landscaping that just went in. You killed all the plants, they're drowned now. All the bark is floated downstream. It's also in the pipes plugging it. You're gonna have to clean those too. Here comes a whole new add-on just because you weren't paying attention to the weather, you weren't paying attention to that sediment sock, you missed it. Maintain those BMPs regularly, listen to your CSOLs, make sure that those inspection reports are filed on time, you know, make sure you have that documentation, have the photos, have the binder that you can reach back and go, what week are you, someone's complaining about pollution from a month ago. You can pull out that binder and say, no, here's the photo. That wasn't us. All right. Now, of course, everybody's going to manage the project. We don't want to tell you how to manage your project. It's your project, but it takes your whole team to manage it. If you're not training the guys on site and they don't even know about these LID areas or rain gardens or the pervious pavement areas that they can't drive on, if you didn't stake them out and make it obvious for them, they're just going to run over it. They're going to ruin the whole plan. If your site inspections and monitoring isn't frequent enough and you're causing yourself problems, you're causing yourself to spend money you don't have, right? That management, it goes through this SWP template is great because it drives kind of that thinking for people who have to pay the bills. Do you need to schedule that major earthwork during a different time because, well, the weather's changed. We've got too much rain coming in. We're going to have to push that off, right? Protecting the LID. This is kind of that out of order thing because you really need to plan on protecting your LIDs right from the beginning. If you've got a rain garden, if you've got infiltration areas, you need to be thinking about that in your site planning right up front. How are trucks going to get to the site if they can't drive over that portion of the parking lot because it's going to be pervious later? Really look at that LID and maintain that plan and that investment. Maintain that. Don't let it fail before you even build it. Okay, and it takes the whole team, right? You've got to start from the beginning. I like to have this Ghostbuster list as well. Who am I going to call when my SWP really isn't managing the site? Who am I going to call? First off, Nikon, Nike, Nokia, I was trained this in my HAZWOPper. Take a picture, run to the toolkit and call somebody, okay? So if you've got a toolkit, you've got the ecology contact, you've got an emergency permittee contact, you've got all of those things down for your people. They know who to call, they can do it, it's easy. Lots of different publications out there. We've talked about all of these. They're all available for you to develop your SWPs. And this is that compliance toolkit I talk about. If you have them set up within your project schedule and you have them so that your Cecil can write it, maybe it's rainproof paper, maybe it's, you know, printed out in, you know, rainproof document holders. If you have that markup guide, if you have those inspection forms available for them, they don't have to like try and develop it while the construction project's going on. It's there, it's done. They can go through and create that defensible record, that evidence that you can say, hey, we did not pollute. All right, that municipal construction stormwater site has an inspection toolkit that's really handy as well. This is how a regulator like me looks at your site. We're going to look at it from this perspective of that SWIP template. So if you use it, it makes compliance way easier. It shortens your time to compliance. The toolkit includes these 5 checklists as well. They're all based in Word. You can use them just like the SWIP template. You can use them to kind of drive the discussion up front. How are you going to plan the financing of all of this construction? And, you know, if we use it as the inspectors, it's good for you to use as well. So what a difference a week makes, right? Your preload slopes were covered with, you know, on the left photo here, you see it covered in hydroseed, right? And it's supposed to have a binder in it, but look, it all washed away that bottom side of the slope. A week later, now all the hydroseed's pretty much washed off, the binder's gone, and even more of the slope is eroded. So it's going to cost even way more money. If they'd have put the hydroseed down, laid down some plastic and secured it on top of it, a little bit more protections, they wouldn't have that extra cost. And I'm Russell Betteridge. I'd like to thank the Stormwater Center and City of Vancouver for including me in this and giving me the opportunity to present today. And I'll turn it over to Royce.
So I'm Royce. Thank you, Russell. I am going to talk a little bit more of that element number 9 and kind of go through it just a little more detailed than what he did. My overview, you'll see what the SWIP looks like, which you've already saw, the element 9. Then we're going to talk about what is pollution. We'll have a definition, 4 definitions of what pollution is. And then we'll talk about construction pollutants and the activities that create them, so you can start to get an idea. Think about what's going to happen on your site so you can start listing out those pollutants that are going to occur. And then we'll go through some BMPs, ones that most everyone knows and maybe ones that are not so often used. And then we'll look at a couple of SWIPs, the good and the bad. So as you saw there, this element 9 tells you to list the pollutants and list those BMPs that are in there. And as we get to the end, I'll kind of show you how to put those there and also let you know that, you know, they could be listed several times in the same SWIP. It doesn't have to be just once. So according to the Oxford Dictionary, pollution is the presence in or introduction into the environment of a substance or thing that is harmful, that has harmful poisonous effects. And then Merriam-Webster says the action or process of making land, water, air, etc. dirty and not safe or suitable to use, or the action of polluting, especially by environmental contamination with man-made waste. But then we have Ecology's definition. And as you can see, it's quite large. Contamination or other alteration of the physical, chemical, biological properties of waters of the state, including change in temperature, taste, color, or turbidity, or odor of the waters, or such discharge of any liquid, gaseous, solid, radioactive, or other substance into any waters of the state, as well or is likely to create a nuisance or render such water harmful, detrimental, injurious to the public health, safety, or welfare, or to the domestic, commercial, industrial, agricultural, recreational, or other legitimate beneficial uses, or to livestock, wild animals, birds, fish, or other aquatic life. So just about anything you can think of could be a pollutant. So we'll go through these. Number 1 pollutant on a construction site and this is even if you're just digging a small trench to install a water line for your air conditioner as you do a renovation on the inside, is sediment. That can come from dirt work, track out of personal vehicles, delivery trucks, heavy equipment. This should always be listed in element number 9. Fuel. As you saw earlier, you could mark whether or not you're going to be fueling on site. There's always a chance when you're refueling that you drip some of that on the ground, or you're storing it. Those containers could leak. There could be residue on those containers. You know, there's leaks from personal vehicles, heavy equipment, or even equipment such as generators. How about vehicle fluids? If you're going to have any vehicles, you could do vehicle equipment maintenance, dripping those fluids on the ground, storage, containers leak, residue on the container. So you pick the container up with stuff on your hands and you put it back down, and then it rains because it's not stored in secondary containment and under cover. Then leaks from your personal car, heavy equipment, equipment such as generators. You're starting to see a pattern here. If any vehicles or equipment will be on site, you should list vehicle fluids as a pollutant, number 9. Concrete washout or slurry. Pouring the concrete, not cleaning up excess concrete when you flatten it out and get it on the other sides when it runs on the sides from your sidewalk, scraping that up and getting rid of it properly. Washing the chute out on the ground, on-site washout areas not properly maintained. How about when you store that slurry? The eco pans overflowing, maybe they're not stored properly, maybe there's leaks or mishandling. And the reason why we have concrete is because it raises the pH of water. As you saw in Russell's presentation, there's a whole section of pH there. Chemicals, any kind of chemicals, and even fertilizers, filling equipment in containers, dripping them on the ground, the storage of chemicals, containers leak, there's residue. These chemicals should be stored in secondary containment and covered. Leaks, spills. How about construction waste and debris? Improper disposal of the debris, not having appropriate containers. How about throwing your personal trash on the ground, like your lunch or your chew can or spit bottle? Any residue from improper storage, building demolition. Dust. Dust is another big one. But dust could come from several places. Your dirt work, your heavy equipment moving, personal equipment moving or vehicles moving, cutting concrete or asphalt, brake dust, building demolition, uncovered soil stockpiles. Chlorine, if you're doing any sort of testing, hydrostatic testing or processed water, power washing. And the big one is the chlorine will kill aquatic life, so it has to be less than 0.1 parts per million. Paint, whether you're painting outside on the building or you're painting the street, washing your brushes and trays and buckets out onto the ground, road painting, the sprayers, not adjusted correctly, commercial building painting, spills, storage, residue on containers, drywall mud, rinsing the trays and containers out onto the ground, rinsing off tools because they don't have an appropriate place to do so, spills from those buckets, they're not covered. Pavement sealant. What if you apply it without enough time to dry and a big rainstorm comes and washes that out into the creek? Or you spill it, or you spray it, or careless when you're spraying it or spreading it. Here's a big one most people don't think about, porta potties. What if you don't place them on hard stand or level ground? Placing them, as you can see, next to the stormwater facility. Wash water from when they come clean them out, getting on the ground. Or leaking, the toilet or the hand washing station, as you can see in this photo. Moving them is another big one. So best management practices. So now that we've thought about all the activities that can create pollutants and what those pollutants are, let's look at some of those that could be listed. Stabilized rock construction entrance. construction road or parking area stabilization, plastic covering, dust control, concrete handling, saw cutting and surface pollution prevention, concrete washout area, silt fence, wattles, inlet protection. Most of these I'm sure you have all seen and probably used in your SWP, but here are some that most people don't use that are in the manual as well. Potable line flushing, water tank maintenance and hydro testing, construction demolition, materials on hand, material delivery, storage and containment, treating and disposing of high pH water, spill prevention and cleanup, employee training. This is a big one. This is one where I say have a tailgate meeting. When you're doing your safety meeting for the week, throw in a SWP topic because Cecils aren't always there. That way you have eyes on the ground, always watching in case something happens, you can get it taken care of right away. Parking and storing vehicles, mobile fueling of vehicles and heavy equipment, maintenance and repair of vehicles and equipment, or building repair, remodeling, painting, and construction. So I'm sure there's a few in there you probably haven't seen. And the good thing about this is the SWP is a living document, so you can always add BMPs to it. If something's occurring that's new that wasn't expected, you can add them. It's always good to have a BMP listed and not be using it, as opposed to having it out on site and it not be in your SWP. So bad SWP. First thing you notice, it says NA, but when you look at the second one, it says that there will be maintenance, fueling, and heavy equipment repair. So instantly, you already know they didn't list this correctly. They have no pollutants, even though they said there's going to be pollutants, and there's no BMPs or responsible staff. Now, is this a good SWP? It lists pollutants, but what's the number one pollutant that's not on there? Sediment. They do have some BMPs listed, but the staff is just the contractor. Who in that contractor am I supposed to talk to? Am I supposed to talk to the Cecil? Am I supposed to talk to the subcontractor concrete person that knows or doesn't know where their eco-pan is? Same thing. Very little BMP descriptions in there, and the responsible staff is just the contractor. All these pH modifying sites present on site, and the only thing they have is pH control for high pH water. Where's your concrete washout BMP? What about concrete handling? Again, only the contractor as the responsible staff. So to conclude, remember, only rain down the drain, and number 9 should never be NA. Just want to thank Ecology for this.
Thank you. That was awesome.